for coming. How are you? So this discussion is all about bridging generational gaps. A little bit about me. I was basically raised in the luxury hospitality space, hi, and specifically with Fairmont Hotels, which I'm not sure, is anyone familiar with Fairmont Hotels? Also, just sharing, I'm from the Bay Area. I have over 20 years of experience in organizational workplace culture. Majority of my experience has been in the luxury space, specifically in hotels, mostly with Fairmont Hotels. I was just asking if anyone was familiar with Fairmont Hotels. It's a worldwide company. 60% of the Fairmont hotels is in the North and Central America locations. And most of our hotels, including San Francisco, for example, has anyone been to the Fairmont in San Francisco? It's over 100 years old. So, in the context of generational, bridging generational gaps, it's awfully old school. And I was interested to have this discussion because many of our hotels and hospitality in general, in my experience, is very traditional. It's very hierarchical. A lot of the systems are not built for a multi-generational workforce. And so I've spent the last few years testing and experimenting in our spaces how to do just that. And so I'm happy to share, how I assessed and how I set up an infrastructure for our hotels to create a culture where employees can be themselves, where they can thrive, where others embrace the differences of different generations, and also some data to help measure it, because if you don't measure it, you have no idea where you are and if it's working. But I am curious, maybe just to start off with, what brought you to this discussion?
I work in public accounting, so
Okay.
we have a lot of directors that have been with us since they were interns, right? And now they are 40 years in and are having
Okay.
quite a bit of trouble understanding the younger generations coming straight out of college. It's been a challenge. They
Okay.
don't understand their communication style. They don't understand,
Yes.
why they're not like them. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the Socrates saying. Have you ever heard of it?
No, what's that?
Do you mind if I read it to you?
Please,
Because I think
yeah.
that you would be mind blown. So, children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority, and they show disrespect for their elders. They love to talk in place of exercise. They are now tyrants, and they do not serve their households. They no longer rise when elders enter the room, and they contradict their parents, chatter before company, cross their legs, and tyrannize their teachers. So if
Wow.
you read this to someone, they're
Wow.
going to automatically say, "Oh, it's millennials, it's Gen Z, it's Gen
Yeah.
X," right? That was said by Socrates in 469
See,
BC.
there are up to 5 generations as of today, and it seems like of all the different generations that could exist in a workplace. But I think that's a really great point of where to start in terms of assessing, is understanding and just having open forum about your background and where you come from, and creating a safe space for someone to just share that. That's where I started with our senior executives, is just tell me how you were raised, what your background is, and also your work experience. So, for example, it was, I grew up in hospitality, and in my 20 years, I grew up with things like, you don't leave work until your boss leaves. You're at work before your boss comes. Things like, if you park in a garage, looking around to see who's still there and still at work. So there's all of these, different stereotypes, and just simply listening to that, maybe not necessarily judging, but just just to have an open discussion, and create a sense of having an open discussion, normalizing that, to understand where each person's experience comes from, and recognizing each person's experience is different. I think that's a really great starting point. Another starting point was gathering data. I don't know about you, but we have so many HR systems that don't talk to each other. um, and it felt so daunting to try to come up with just a simple spreadsheet of data where you can see on average like where do most of your generations lie, like what is at any given point, at least on a monthly basis, like what is the makeup of your company in terms of its people. I'm curious if anyone has any systems like that currently set up. Yeah.
We use Workday and has everything into our Workday system so that we didn't have to have 50 different.
Yeah.
We use it for a lot, even for surveys. Like everything is within the system.
Okay.
Our generations are predominantly those. I think it's what is it? Z? It's coming out of college right now.
Okay.
That's predominantly our workforce because it's just wider at the bottom and gets skinnier at the top.
Right.
So it's great to understand, but what has really helped me with understanding where we are is upward mentorship.
Yeah.
All the top wants to do is explain their point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom doesn't really explain, right? Because they're intimidated or they're nervous or they don't know if they should talk, out of turn. So we've implemented upward mentorship, which has really helped the top understand the bottom.
Right, absolutely.
So yeah.
And I think it's a great point because I find, and tell me what you think too, a lot of mentorship programs are based on hierarchy. So it's the older generation that is there to mentor you because they can teach you something. They can tell you what to do, they can give you direction versus reverse mentoring or upward mentoring. I love that term, and putting together a framework where, and it could be just a series of very simple questions, but setting the tone for that to be a reverse mentorship or upward mentorship, and selling it in terms of what the benefits are. If you can understand at least four other generations other than your own, because there are up to five in any given workplace. Like, think of what you can accomplish having all of those different perspectives from an internal employee standpoint, but also externally from a customer standpoint. It's free essentially to get that marketing viewpoint of this other generation. It's just as daunting and scary to senior level or other generations to open up that discussion. I tend to forget. I don't know about you, but a lot of people tend to forget that it's probably equally as daunting for other generations to be able to step into that zone and basically ask for help, because you're asking for help, which can be hard just in general. The other aspect I think that's also really important for us was to measure retention and promotions. That was a huge key measurement for things like the mentor program and the open discussions, to see, how can we create equality when it comes to all of the stereotypes and based on generation, but also create a development system that catered to all generations. I find that younger generations, they have a different expectation in terms of development, but also you have technology at your fingertips, which has accelerated other generations' learning and development, and we just didn't have structures to support that. For example, our promotion policy was you had to be in your current leadership role for at least 12 months. And now the expectation is you're talking at least about what that person wants to do next at around 6 months. And at around 8 months, they're expecting to be interviewing and in their next step on the way to their next role, so that at the 12-month mark, or at least a little bit before that, they receive a promotion, or they are doing something developmental that allows them to feel like they have accelerated in their career. So I'm curious if anyone's experienced that too, whether it's personally or in the workplace, an accelerated expectation of learning and development. development, I find, isn't always, it's becoming less and less about specifically a promotion, but it is the participation in a mentor program. It's the opportunities to go to, different departments, or in our case different hotels, to task force and learn another hotel. It's the opportunity to speak to a corporate office person, um, classes, certifications, things like that. They're the definition of purpose and um, promotion is defined, and actually is an opportunity to have a wide range of options for companies, rather than previously, for certain generation, it was purely just a promotion in a traditional sense. um, it's a great point about values and purpose. There are so many different exercises, simple exercises that you can do to scale finding out what each person's values are. I find that some companies don't do it because they're maybe they don't know how, and it seems daunting when you have, well, even a small company, but also when you have a couple hundred of employees like we do. How do you find out in a very intentional way what everyone's values are? And they're just simple questions that you can ask to find out, what values are, and different values exercises that also evolve, because I mean, we're human beings, so our values change daily at a minimum, potentially, if not annually. So I think the consistency in some of these practices too can help set up just an environment where, you are treating each individual based on what their values are. So I'm curious if anyone does any values exercises in their company, and what I think also having a check-in system periodically throughout the year with all of these different tools is it gives a really basic, consistent structure to be able to find out at any given point someone's expectations, and if their values have changed. And there's some, again, really simple frameworks that you can use to find that out. Whether it's just asking what's working, what's not working, what needs work. Um, we do that every quarter, so that with the direct supervisor as well as the leader, so that in case there are any gaps with expectations or what they're thinking, or um, they're in our world is heavily operational, so everyone is in a go 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 mindset. So it just creates a moment of mindfulness, so that the relationship can continue to build, and everyone's on the same page at any given point throughout the year. Um, we have 10 minutes left, and I'm just curious what questions people have about bridging generational gaps.
Spoken about bridging gaps between what I interpret as like more senior leadership or senior positions and entry level positions. In our organization, sometimes we have folks that are on more like entry level positions that are older folks. And so connecting them with their peers who are coming in as Gen Z, or getting them to stay invested in their own professional development could sometimes be challenging. And so I'm wondering if you or anyone else has like experiences like that.
Yeah, it reminded me of two things. From a recruitment standpoint, I'm curious, now that we have up to 5 generations, possibly in the workplace, we've had to evolve um, our recruitment approach, and have now focused on a skills-based approach. So, in other words, the questions that we, are asking are skills-based, versus it was heavily reliant on previous experience, and solely previous experience, which really limited us to a very small talent pool. And so now that we're asking different types of questions, which are, to put it very simply, they're based on the challenges that we have at work in their real life, recent challenges that we ask questions. How would you handle X, Y, and Z? It's an evolving recruitment model that allows us to hire for skills that are relevant at any given point. whenever we are recruiting. And I think it also allows us to learn, from one generation to the next or within the same generation, what skills exist or don't exist. And we use that as a tool also to create training programs that are relevant to, the current business needs and the current talent pool. But we also have to your point or question, we have a peer-to-peer framework where if it is that it is the same generation, it's asking some of those same checking questions, curious questions to learn about each other, and not assuming that even though you're in the same generation, you know everything about one another, but setting up, a framework, whether it's just a simple um, gathering, informal gathering to spend time together, to team build, but also the values exercises, for example, pairing people intentionally in that way to find out more about each other, even if you're in the same generation. But I am curious, does anyone else have any other tools or framework? You were nodding along with the recruitment approach also. We have many tenured employees. I want to say the most tenured employee that we have in the building is 46 years in the same hotel. And for me, it was a mindset of how we looked at our tenured employees. And it's a combination of understanding their values. So for that generation, what they valued was putting food on the table. They valued a stable schedule. Um, you could not mess with their days off because they have, in a union environment, bitted shifts. So it was making sure that that was consistent, and then it was also helping their manager or their leader understand that that's what they value. And you're fortunate enough that it's not so complex. It's very simple, and also we need those people who are going to be stable and who are going to show up to work for 46 years. And that's something that, as an employer, um, is part of our retention measurement. It's one of the reasons why we have one of the most highest retention. So I think it a lot going even deeper than that. It was a mindset to understanding, what they valued, and also the benefit for them. They've been able to put their children and their grandchildren through college and build generational wealth. So I think it does go back to, and what has worked is the educational piece on that, and that it's okay that someone wants to continue to stay in their role. And so how do you maximize the fact that they are there 8 hours? Like, what else could everyone else do, knowing that you have a dedicated recruiter or whatever that person does? Everyone around them is free to just be flexible and, have different types of work styles that evolve versus this one person who is going to be loyal.
The strategies I've used because we have administrative assistants that have been in public accounting for like 30 years and they just want to stay administrative
Yeah.
assistants, but they do get kind of bored, right? So what I do is I coach the managers to offer a change in mindset of how they're currently doing their job, so that it's a little bit of a change that sparks interest and kind of gets them moving. So I'll tell them, if somebody comes to you with a problem, ask them for what they believe their solution to be.
Yeah.
That stimulation in their brain is already enough, right? That's already enough for them to be like, oh, this is a little different. This feels exciting. And then they will start providing you with solutions. Not only will it help them, but it'll help you to not have to be the overall strategic leader in everything, right?
Yeah.
As a manager. So that's what I kind of do. I have them ask questions versus tell them what to do. So then
Yeah.
that keeps them stimulated.
There's so much value in that institutional knowledge. And I'm seeing it start to go away, which freaks me out because when you don't have that knowledge in the building, you lose the history of the past and what worked, and some of the practices. And I think that's also a really great point is SOPs, for example, like getting the knowledge that's in their head onto paper to use as a tool to analyze for the future is so important. It's one of the reasons why we started to measure our retention and promotion, but also the different generations, because I've started to sense so many people retiring, and there was a sense of urgency that I needed to create with other people too, to get all that institutional knowledge on paper before everyone leaves in that sense. Were there any other aspects, I'm curious, that you would have liked to have been included? Yes.
How do you encourage more of like skills-based development
Okay,
in
okay.
some of those roles where people have this long-standing tenure?
Okay, okay.
Maybe they were very competent and like in their role when they first started 20 years ago, and now skills development that they need to perform at the same level in that same role 20 years later is not quite the same, and yet it's not necessarily required of them to take Google Speed technology-based courses or things like that, but their peers are coming in with that skill, and it's kind of separating out the kind of skill.
I mean, the harsh answer is, and I say this because our company has evolved its leadership competencies or employee competencies over time. And so what we do is we're transparent about this is the expectation, and it's company wide. So it's not specific to any one individual or any one generation. So creating that consistency, and then also translating it very specifically to their day-to-day tasks. But making that a consistent annual process, so it's not just every 5 years or so, like you're going to need a different skill because your job has changed, and sorry, you have to do it. It is complex. This is a 1 minute answer, but it could be performance, managing. Ideally, it is dialing into that person to understand how they learn, and the best way for them to learn these new skills. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.